Fear is something we all encounter, but most people misunderstand its role in their lives. It's commonly seen as a threat, a force that must be avoided or suppressed. But fear isn't your enemy. It's not the thing that's holding you back. The real danger is allowing fear to become your decision maker. When that happens, you stop living based on your potential and start living according to your limitations. That's when dreams die and comfort zones become cages. The truth is, fear is not a stop sign. It's a signal that you're on the edge of growth, that something meaningful is at stake. When you begin to look at fear as a form of communication rather than a barrier, everything changes. It becomes your guide, not your captor. Think about it. The most transformative moments in your life weren't comfortable. They weren't safe. They involved uncertainty, risk, and yes, fear. But they also carried the potential for expansion, for self-discovery, for achievement. Fear's job from a biological standpoint is to keep you safe. That's fine when you're facing physical danger, but in the modern world, most of our fears are psychological. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of judgment. These are not tigers in the jungle. They are illusions that disguise themselves as warnings. And because we've been trained to avoid discomfort, we respond to these signals as if they're life-threatening. But avoiding fear in these moments doesn't protect you, it paralyzes you. The problem isn't the presence of fear. The problem is the relationship you have with it. When fear shows up, most people freeze or flee. They turn down opportunities, avoid conversations, reject risks that might help them grow. They wait until they feel ready. But readiness is a myth. Growth doesn't come when you feel safe. It comes when you act despite the fear, when you understand that the discomfort you're feeling is a necessary ingredient of transformation. Let's take a deeper look at the signal fear sends. When you feel afraid, it usually means that something matters to you. You don't feel fear about things you don't care about. You don't fear failing at something that doesn't mean anything. Fear is an indicator of significance. That means when you feel fear, you're near something important, a conversation that could change your relationship, a decision that could reshape your career, a choice that could lead to a new level of self-respect. Fear is a compass. It points toward what you need to face in order to evolve, but only if you're willing to stop treating it like a wall. Most people use fear as an excuse. They tell themselves, "I can't do it because I'm afraid." But the real sentence should be, "I must do it because I'm afraid." The fear is highlighting the very thing that needs to be confronted for you to move forward. The moment you understand this, truly internalize it, fear becomes less of a weight and more of a signal flare. It doesn't mean you won't feel it. It means you won't obey it. You learn to listen without being led by it. You feel the nerves, the pressure, the doubt, and you move anyway. That's when your self-respect grows. That's when confidence starts to take root. Not because the fear went away, but because you showed yourself you can move through it. When fear arises, ask yourself better questions. What is this fear trying to teach me? What value or belief is this fear connected to? What opportunity is hiding behind this discomfort? Fear isn't just a warning, it's an invitation. An invitation to level up, to find courage, to build trust in yourself. And when you stop running from it and start running toward the lesson it offers, fear begins to dissolve. You can't destroy fear by avoiding it. You destroy it by confronting it with awareness, with intention, and with action. Fear is a signal, and if you learn to read that signal properly, it will guide you directly to the version of yourself you've always wanted to become. Every emotion we experience is tied directly to our state, the way we move, the way we breathe, the way we focus. Fear is no exception. It doesn't just appear randomly. It emerges from a particular state of being. And the truth is, you can't live in a high, energy, empowered, and focused state and stay paralyzed by fear at the same time. The two are incompatible. Fear thrives in hesitation. It thrives in stillness. It thrives when the body is tight, the breathing is shallow, and the mind is fixated on everything that could go wrong. But here's what most people never realize. You can change your emotional state instantly by shifting your physical state. The fastest way to start breaking the grip of fear is to move. Motion changes emotion. Think about how your body feels when you're scared, shoulders slouched, head down, heart racing, breath shallow, movements small. Now imagine the opposite, standing tall, chest open, breathing deeply, walking with purpose. That shift in your body creates a shift in your psychology. It signals to your brain that you're in control, not in danger. And in that shift, fear starts to lose its grip. We've been conditioned to try and think our way out of fear. People sit still, overanalyze, ruminate, and try to logically convince themselves not to be afraid. But that rarely works. Why? Because you're trying to change your emotions from a low-energy, passive state. When the body is stuck, the mind gets stuck. But when the body changes, the mind follows. Action comes before clarity, and movement comes before mindset. This isn't just motivation, it's neurology. Your nervous system responds to what your body is doing. If your physiology signals collapse or caution, your brain interprets that as a need for defense, which triggers fear. But if your physiology signals power and purpose, the brain gets a different message. I've got this. That's not just a belief, it's a biochemical response. Hormones shift, blood flow increases, mental sharpness improves. Suddenly, what felt overwhelming 5 minutes ago starts to feel manageable. You can use this principle anytime fear tries to take over. Before a big decision, before a hard conversation, before stepping into the unknown, get into motion. Change your posture, change your breath, change your tone. Don't wait for the feeling of confidence to show up. Create it. Train your body to lead your emotions, not the other way around. Because when fear takes the lead, your life shrinks. But when you take the lead, your life expands. What you focus on also determines your state. If you're focused on everything that could go wrong, you'll feel fear. If you're focused on your past failures, you'll feel stuck. But if you shift your focus to your strengths, to your vision, to what's possible, if you act, everything begins to change. Focus equals feeling. You feel what you focus on, so ask yourself, am I focusing on fear or on purpose? Am I looking at limitations or opportunities? This is a practice, not a one-time trick. You train it. You build rituals around it. You prime your state every day. Before stepping into any situation where fear might creep in, you don't just hope, you'll be brave. You prepare. You activate your body. You program your mind. You choose your focus, because courage isn't born out of comfort. It's built through conscious effort. It's built through consistently putting yourself in an empowered state so fear doesn't have room to operate. The people who seem fearless aren't fearless, they've just mastered their state. They've learned how to shift quickly from hesitation to movement, from doubt to decision. They don't wait to feel like taking action. They act in a way that creates the feeling. It's reverse engineered, and the good news is anyone can learn it. You don't need to eliminate fear to move forward. You just need to take control of the state you're in when fear shows up. That starts with your body, your breath, your focus, and your language. Every word you speak about yourself reinforces a state. Saying, I'm stuck, creates a state of helplessness. Saying, I'm figuring this out, builds momentum. Even in your self-talk, you're choosing a state. And that state either feeds your fear or fuels your courage. This is the power that's available at any moment. It doesn't come from outside. It comes from within, from your ability to master your state before your fear masters you. Fear often feels like a heavy fog that clouds your mind, distorts your vision, and paralyzes your decisions. But beneath that fog is a powerful truth. Fear thrives in uncertainty. The less you know, the the more your mind fills the gaps with worst-case scenarios. It creates stories, assumptions, and imaginary threats, not because you're weak, but because your brain is trying to make sense of the unknown. That's what fear feeds on, the absence of clarity. But the moment you bring clarity into the picture, fear begins to dissolve. Clarity is one of the most underrated tools for destroying fear. It's not just about knowing what you want. It's about getting specific, sharp, and honest about your direction, your decisions, and your identity. When you lack clarity, everything feels risky. Your next step becomes uncertain, your goals feel distant, and your self-confidence takes a hit. You hesitate, overthink, and eventually stall out, not because you're incapable, but because your brain has no certainty to anchor itself to. Think about how powerful clarity is in everyday life. When you know where you're going, you walk with purpose. When you know why you're doing something, you're willing to endure discomfort. When your priorities are clear, distractions lose their power. That same principle applies when it comes to fear. If you want to break free from the paralysis that fear creates, you have to trade confusion for clarity. Start by getting clear on what you're actually afraid of. Most people don't do this. They feel fear, but they don't examine it. They avoid it, bury it, or try to push through it without understanding it. But fear becomes manageable when you define it. Ask yourself, what exactly am I afraid of? Is it failure, embarrassment, rejection, loss? Be precise, because once you name it, you can face it, and what you face, you can change. Then get clear on what you want instead. What does success look like? What outcome are you chasing? What kind of person do you want to become? Don't leave your goals vague. Vague goals create vague results, and vague results leave you stuck in fear. But when you define the vision clearly and emotionally connect to it, fear takes a back seat to focus. You're no longer operating from avoidance. You're operating from alignment. It's also critical to get clear on your reasons, your why. Why must you move forward? Why can't you let fear decide the outcome? A strong why provides emotional fuel. It reminds you that the discomfort of fear is temporary, but the reward of following through is lasting. And when your why is stronger than your fear, your direction becomes non-negotiable. Another layer of clarity that dismantles fear is strategy. Often, people know what they want, but they don't know how to get there, and that how gap creates anxiety. That's why it's important to break your goals into steps. Reverse engineer the path. What's the next small move you can make? What's within your control right now? Fear thrives when the journey feels too big, too ambiguous. But when you chunk it down and focus on the next action, you regain your sense of control. One of the most important forms of clarity you can develop is clarity around identity. Who are you in the face of fear? Are you someone who shrinks back or steps forward? What values define you when things are hard? When your identity is unclear, fear will offer you a default, and that default is usually self-doubt. But when you've decided in advance that you're the kind of person who takes courageous action, your choices begin to align with that image. Clarity in identity leads to consistency in behavior. This doesn't mean that fear disappears forever. It just means you stop letting it run the show. Fear loses its influence the moment you remove the unknowns. When your mind is anchored to a clear destination, a clear reason, and a clear strategy, there's less room for fear to grow. It becomes noise in the background, not the voice at the steering wheel. Clarity is not just intellectual, it's emotional. You need to feel it in your body, not just understand it in your mind. Write it down, speak it aloud, visualize it. Make your clarity stronger than your confusion. The brain craves certainty, and if you don't give it something solid to hold on to, it will create fear to fill the gap. But when you give it vision, purpose, and direction, it finds stability. And in that stability, fear begins to fall away. Fear doesn't disappear by chance, it disappears through confrontation. And confrontation doesn't have to be dramatic or reckless. It simply means showing up again and again, even when your mind tries to talk you out of it. Most people believe that courage is something you're born with, something that shows up in moments of crisis like a lightning strike. But real courage is built, not found. It's developed through repetition, by doing the very thing that scares you over and over until fear no longer controls you. The truth is, fear loses power every time you act in spite of it. The first time you do something that terrifies you, your mind screams, your heart races, and your body resists. But if you do it anyway, even with shaking hands and racing thoughts, you prove something to yourself. You prove that fear isn't fatal. That alone is a breakthrough. And if you return to that fear again and again with intention, something powerful happens. Familiarity begins to replace anxiety. Think about a time when something once felt impossible, but now feels natural. Maybe it was public speaking, starting a new job, or walking into a gym for the first time. The fear in those moments was real, but so was the growth. What made the difference? Repetition. The willingness to go back, to show up, to engage with discomfort until it became manageable. Fear is often a reaction to uncertainty, but repetition creates certainty. Every time you repeat a behavior, your nervous system becomes more familiar with it. The unknown becomes known. What once triggered panic starts to feel like a challenge instead of a threat. This is not just mental, it's physiological. Your body learns to calm down in situations where it once spiraled. That's the power of exposure. You're not trying to eliminate fear overnight. You're training your system to respond differently over time. It's important to understand that repetition isn't about perfection. It's about consistency. You don't need to face the biggest version of your fear on day one. You start with what's within reach. If public speaking terrifies you, maybe you start by speaking up in a small meeting. If starting a business scares you, maybe you begin by sharing your idea with someone you trust. Small steps, done consistently, rewire your perception of risk. What used to feel overwhelming starts to feel like progress. You also start to build evidence. Every time you face fear and act anyway, you build a case in your own mind. A case that says, I can do hard things, I can survive uncertainty, I can handle discomfort. And the more evidence you collect, the less space fear has to make its argument. Fear thrives when your mind can only reference failure or avoidance. But when you've shown yourself a pattern of courage, you create a new standard. This approach turns courage into a habit, not a moment. It becomes a pattern you lean on, not a personality trait you either have or don't have. Courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you've trained yourself to act anyway. You've trained yourself to override hesitation with motion and doubt with decision. Every act of courage, no matter how small, expands your identity. You begin to see yourself differently, not as someone who avoids fear, but as someone who confronts it. This shift is foundational. Because once your self-image starts to change, your behavior follows. You begin to take on challenges more readily. You become more comfortable with discomfort, and your world begins to expand, not because the fear is gone, but because you've grown bigger than it. You can't think your way into confidence. You act your way there. Confidence is the result of repeatedly showing up in fear and proving to yourself that you can handle it. It's a byproduct of resilience, and resilience is built one repetition at a time. Repetition is the quiet work. It doesn't always look impressive. It's not flashy or dramatic, but over time it transforms everything. It turns avoidance into action, hesitation into habit, and fear into focus. When you commit to meeting your fear daily, even in small doses, you take control of your growth. And that's where transformation lives, not in the absence of fear, but in the presence of consistent, courageous action. Fear isn't something that only exists in your mind, It's something that shapes your behavior, your patterns, and ultimately your identity. The problem is that many people allow fear to become part of who they are without realizing it. They start to build habits around fear, routines designed not for growth, but for protection. And over time, those habits harden into a personality. What starts as a moment of hesitation becomes a lifestyle of avoidance. If you want to destroy fear forever, you don't just need to confront it once, you need to replace the habits that feed it. Habits are the invisible architecture of your life. They determine what you do when you're tired, what you do when you're stressed, how you respond to challenges, and how you show up when no one's watching. Fear thrives in passive habits: procrastination, overthinking, seeking constant reassurance, waiting for the perfect time. These patterns don't seem harmful on the surface, but underneath, they are driven by fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of discomfort. And every time you engage in them, you reinforce the idea that fear is in charge. The way to break this cycle is by deliberately building habits that train your mind and body to move through fear, not with force, but with discipline. Courage doesn't come from hype. It comes from structure. It comes from showing up every day and doing the work, especially when you don't feel like it. You need habits that challenge your comfort zone, push your limits, and condition you to make bold decisions when the moment comes. One of the most powerful habits you can build is the habit of intentional discomfort. This means making a daily practice of doing something that challenges you, not in a reckless way, but in a way that conditions resilience. Maybe it's having a difficult conversation instead of avoiding it. Maybe it's speaking up when you'd rather stay silent. Maybe it's waking up earlier, starting a project you've delayed, or simply sitting in silence with your thoughts. When you train yourself to do the hard thing on purpose, you send a clear message to your nervous system: fear is not the boss here. Another habit that helps destroy fear is the habit of decision making. Fear loves indecision. It keeps you stuck in the loop of what if and not yet. But boldness is a muscle, and the more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. Make small decisions quickly and commit to them. Build a rhythm of execution. When you train yourself to decide and act rather than wait and wish, fear has less time to grow. Decision breaks the momentum of fear. Every time you choose action over hesitation, you take back control. Reflection is also a key habit, but only if it leads to learning, not looping. Fear often hijacks reflection and turns it into rumination. You replay mistakes, second guess yourself, and reinforce self-doubt. But when you turn reflection into a structured habit where you ask, what did I learn? What did I do well? What can I do differently next time? You begin to turn fear into feedback. You no longer see setbacks as signs that you should stop. You see them as fuel for growth. You also need the habit of visualization, not the fantasy kind, but the strategic kind. This means mentally rehearsing the version of you who shows up with courage. Athletes do this before big games. Surgeons do it before complex procedures. They don't visualize ease, they visualize execution. You can do the same. Train your brain to see yourself succeeding in the very situations that scare you. That mental blueprint creates familiarity, and familiarity reduces fear. One more crucial habit is the habit of language. The words you use every day shape the way you think and act. If your internal language is full of doubt, excuses, or negative predictions, you are reinforcing fear every time you speak. But if your language reflects possibility, strength, and responsibility, you start programming your subconscious for courage. Say what you want to become. Speak power into your identity. Over time, your language becomes your mindset, and your mindset becomes your reality. You don't rise to the level of your motivation, you fall to the level of your habits. If your habits are rooted in fear, you'll keep living a life of limitation. But if you build habits rooted in courage, discipline, and growth, fear begins to lose its influence. You don't need to be fearless, you need to be consistent. Replace the habits that feed fear with habits that train boldness, and fear will no longer shape your life. Fear will always try to whisper in your ear. It will always look for cracks in your confidence, moments of hesitation, and places where your vision is unclear. But once you understand that fear is not a wall, it's a signal, you begin to respond differently. You stop treating fear as an enemy and start recognizing it as a challenge that demands your strength, your decision, your courage. And when you rise to meet it over and over again, something powerful happens. Fear no longer drives your decisions, you do. It's not about being fearless. That's a myth. It's about being trained. About building the inner architecture that allows you to move, speak, act, and lead even when fear is present. Because the most courageous people in the world aren't the ones who never feel fear. They're the ones who have built the internal habits, rituals, and beliefs that prevent fear from making their decisions for them. They know fear is loud, but they've trained themselves to be louder. You've learned that your state matters, that how you move, how you breathe, and what you focus on determines whether you shrink or expand in the face of fear. You've seen how clarity is the antidote to anxiety. When you know who you are, what you want, and why it matters, fear loses its grip. You've learned that repetition builds courage, that taking small, consistent steps forward is more powerful than waiting for the perfect moment. And you've discovered that the habits you live by determine whether fear controls you or fuels you. Every day, you are either reinforcing fear or reducing it. Every choice you make, every word you speak, every thought you entertain is a vote for the kind of life you're building. You don't need more time, you don't need more permission, you need more truth. And the truth is, you have everything inside you already. What's been missing is not potential, but practice, not desire, but discipline. So from this moment forward, let fear be your compass, not your cage. If something scares you and aligns with your purpose, it's probably a sign that it's time to step forward. Not because you're guaranteed success, but because you're committed to growth. The path to power, freedom, and fulfillment runs straight through the heart of fear, and the person who's willing to walk that path again and again becomes unstoppable, not because the world gets easier, but because they get stronger. Courage is not a moment, it's a decision you make every single day. It's a lifestyle, a standard, and once you choose it, everything changes. You'll think bigger, speak bolder, lead better, and live freer. Not because fear is gone, but because it no longer defines you. You define you.